Welcome to Women in B2B Marketing, a show where CMOs, VPs of marketing, and all strong women leaders in B2B discuss their top tactics, strategies, and tips for building high-performing teams, leveraging trends, and ultimately rocking their marketing careers. Made by and for women, insightful for all. I'm your host and 15-year B2B marketer, Jane Serra. Let's dive in. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us for Women in B2B Marketing. I'm pumped for our conversation today. We're going to dive deep into ABM with the one and only Kristina Jaramillo. If you are super American and don't try Jaramillo, but I'm in Miami, I feel like I have to try to represent. But Kristina is the president of Personal ABM, an amazing ABM agency out there. So she knows, and you've been doing this for, 14, 15 years, ABM?
Yeah, this is 14 years. I started officially in 2011. So yeah, it's crazy to put a number of that on it, but yeah.
Crazy. So first of all, kudos on getting into ABM so early. I don't think I know anyone else that's done ABM for that long. So very cool. So excited to jump into how you started Personal ABM and what got you into this ABM world.
Yeah, I officially started in 2011, but I don't think ABM was like a coined term. It was definitely something that we were doing. It just didn't have like a term. It was just more personal marketing, more targeted marketing and relevant to, the buyers. I joined first with my partner after he had a content marketing agency because we jointly saw opportunities to help sales, help marketing teams make stronger connections. And in the beginning, it was strictly through LinkedIn and content. And over the years, we've kind of morphed. And it was because we saw that a lot of teams were lacking relevance across all levels, across industry, company, persona, individual, operational, and even customer levels. So we saw that need and we were helping sales and marketing teams drive conversations with key accounts. We were very targeted on named accounts. And we learned that sales and, and marketing and customer success all have to come together because they were having an issue with accounts going dark and they were getting on, either becoming disengaged, unresponsive. And, we noticed that was a big issue with our clients. So we evolved our firm to be, instead of account-based marketing, more account-based go-to-market, because we're focusing on improving digital, social, email, live conversations, and the account experience all the way across to the buyer's journey. So that is very cohesive and that the experiences that are being delivered are actually, seamless and it makes it stronger for the customer at the end of the day. And a lot of ABM firms that I've seen are focusing on getting accounts to pipeline, whereas we focus on accounts to revenue and driving greater revenue and NRR growth with existing accounts because we provide some enablement. And what we're finding is that teams need account insights for conversations that they're having. So write content in the middle of a buying journey, in the middle of a renewal cycle or a retention, expansion kind of relationship in order to drive revenue. And we, along the way, since we've been doing it for 14 years or so, we did see that, ABM tech came into a lot of people are investing in it, but they're not necessarily effectively leveraging the platform. So we are helping people and companies get greater returns on their investments in platforms like 6sense and Demandbase. And we're putting solutions together to help with ICP development and management so that they can predictably or more predictably land and expand these accounts. And ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to help buyers avoid indecisiveness or going cold or, getting stuck in their journey because it's just too hard to make a decision.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I want to take a step back. You mentioned how you got into ABM before it was even a term, right? Which I completely get. I remember when the term first came out, the acronym, I was like, this is so annoying because it's what we do. Like, why do we have to brand it and make it feel like it's this whole new thing that B2B marketers have kind of been doing in certain ways? But it now has, I think, evolved into like actual practices versus the fluff when it first started. So it's interesting. But what would you say, having seen this evolution firsthand, how would you define ABM or ABX today?
So I would say it's basically the opposite of targeted demand gen, which is what a lot of companies have put it in that space. And I think with the utilization of these tech platforms, and demand gen is what we know as marketers. They were trying to, and a lot of marketers have been trying to kind of just add it on into what they've already been doing. So they think it's just a targeted demand gen play when it's more of how are we going to get accounts to revenue? And I see a lot of teams are jumping right into, let's define our ICP, let's select account lists, align on these tactics or campaigns, and then invest in tech. But they're not changing how the team goes to market. So it's anyone who's touching a customer, who's touching a buyer, how they're even packaging their solutions, how they're communicating their value. They're not changing how they engage with buyers across the organization, how teams are even structured. So that goes to I've seen a lot of BDRs now being rolled up into marketing so that they could be more effective and not just be an account-based marketing. That's why I think a lot of the change into account-based experiences is so key because it involves everyone. It doesn't just say that it's a marketing thing. And to me, ABM is not about fixing or filling the pipeline. It should really be about bringing changes to the business while improving the experiences that the strategic Q1 accounts that we're trying to target are having. So ABM should be about fixing revenue challenges, delivering business results, not these lovely MQLs and MQA. It should be about accelerating high value accounts to revenue and ideally at a higher ACV and then expanding those deals to increase the customer lifetime value. So what I've seen is that a lot of companies have tried to retrofit ABM into what they're already doing. And that's why, it's not being as successful because when you're retrofitting something, you're just adding in maybe a new solution. You're not changing sales and marketing interactions or customer success motions. You're really still marketing to and add accounts instead of, speaking to them on a one-to-one level. And, then that's where we go back to our old ways of campaigns and tactics, retargeted ads, outreach campaigns, building that pipeline. But there's a huge number discrepancy between pipeline numbers and revenue. And I think since we focus on a lot of people focusing on the leads into the pipeline, there's lacking the focus of how are we going to influence the buying decision? How are we going to get deals to the next level as a team, not just on the marketing side? And I really think ABM should be viewed as a business strategy, not a tactic. And how it should focus on how we're going to fix the red in the business. Are we having issues with win rates? Are we having issues with deal sizes, sales velocity, stage progression? Where are we missing the mark? And then we can apply the right strategies and approach, and then the tactics to kind of address that. And, to me, demand gen is really still important. It feeds into ABM. So it educates the market in the band, and then ABM, you speak to the specific accounts at specific mode.
I like the visual that you're painting for me right now. I kind of see, tell me if I'm getting this right and expand on it. Would you think that having somebody external, like your agency, come in, or having a separate ABM team or person that's outside of sales or marketing and more reporting to the CRO, does that help because then they can kind of work with sales, marketing, CS along the way, and put all of those together where it's not a marketing play, it's not ABM, it's ABX, and this is outside working with each of these teams. Is that kind of how you see it working best?
I think ideally that would be the way. I still think that there's too much of a misconception that it's account-based marketing. We're so stuck in that already since we've been using that term for a decade now. So the shift is going to be slower, but ideally the account-based strategist, experienced person should be really focused on revenue. So aligning with the CRO and speaking sales language will not only get them in your corner because you can do as much or great work when it comes to an account-based approach. But if sales isn't continuing the conversation and delivering on those experiences, sharing the content, sharing the messaging that you're creating, then it's going to fall flat. So ideally, it would be work aligning really closely if you don't have a RevOps person with the senior sales leader or a CRO, because it's all about, to me, ABM should be about how are we influencing revenue, from deal sizes to retention and protecting revenue, but definitely on revenue and not about pipeline.
Yeah, and there's so much involved in ABM, ABX that It can't be someone's, like you said, it's not a tactic, it's a strategy. Someone has to own this, right? And it can't be some like another line item on somebody's plate.
Oh, no, there's no way.
Mm-hmm.
You can't give it to someone who's already, I've seen too many poor demand gen people given ABM and demand gen title. So basically it sounds to me they gave them another tool and it's just impossible. And if you want to get true one-to-one ABM where you're talking to accounts, then you're going to need a dedicated person to work on that. Because to me, one to few and one to many is more on the demand side. And then the one-to-one is true ABM.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder when you come into and people bring you into they hire your agency and you're brought into companies. Over the years, what do you see teams doing wrong? How do they start out wrong implementing their version of ABM?
Yeah. So what we've seen and we're continuing to see, and hopefully it's going to change, but most go-to-market teams and ABM firms, they kind of skip to defining goals with ABM, identifying ICP, figuring account prioritization, outlining activities, campaigns, cadences. So it's a lot of similar things to regular demand gen. But again, there's simply retrofitting ABM on top of existing processes. So what they're really essentially doing is better targeted marketing or targeted demand gen. And they didn't really assess or take that step back to look at the state of the current go-to-market and look for where there's red in the business, because it's going to be different for every organization. They didn't assess why accounts are churning. They didn't do a win-loss analysis, which is really important before you even start, so you know where to focus your efforts. They didn't look across the pipeline and customer life cycle to see where accounts maybe are disengaging or where they go dark, and then trying to uncover that why. And they didn't look at stalled deals. And, stalled opportunities are often untapped gold mines, because we've seen across the board, deals are stalling for reasons that are fixable. So maybe it's unclear messaging, weak differentiation, misaligned with your stakeholders. If you're not talking to the right people or speaking to the right person and speaking the way that they would speak and what's important to them, then you could have all the great marketing in the world. It's not going to be as effective. And we've also seen a lot of people have competitive blind spots where they have a way of doing things in their solution or their tools and their business that their competitors don't, and they don't emphasize it. They don't bring it to the forefront. They don't capitalize it and make it like the center of all their messaging. So we encourage people to, the first step in adopting an account-based approach would be a readiness program to kind of assess this current state of your go-to market, take a closer look at all these issues that you might be having, looking for patterns of buyer uncertainty and seeing how we can change those account experiences to enable these buyers, see where there are gaps and maybe value props that we're trying to convey. And if sales and marketing are telling the right stories, they're telling the same stories. If they're giving the right reframes, building the right business case, there's a lot of opportunities to refine your strategies, reset your plays, set yourself up for bigger wins. And if you give yourself a chance to optimize that go-to market and improve those interactions, then the account-based strategy, ABX, whatever your firm calls it or your organization calls it, will be more successful in the long run, because I've seen too many account-based strategies try to be adopted and then they're not successful in 90 days. So people it didn't work. And it's definitely a long-term play. It's not a short-term win.
I know you have a bunch of examples you can walk through, which will be awesome. What does an ABX or a full account-based strategy, what can it look like? Like what channels? I want to kind of make this literal, right? And something tangible that people can think through. True ABX strategy, what can it entail? And if let's say we're talking one-to-one, I haven't talked too much about one-to-one on this show yet. So if we could go through like a one-to-one example or what it could look like, that would be really helpful to bite on.
Yeah. So when we're doing one-to-one with people or with organizations, we've seen that the best way to figure out what works and what's not working is to look at the customers. Do you have customers that you think are at risk? Are they up for renewal soon? And you want to see if you can retain and expand them at the same time. And we kind of take a step back and look at those. Which ones are the best, getting the most success from us? Which are the most cost effective to serve? Because even the ones that are most successful, sometimes they might cost you more to serve them. If you can do that kind of analysis,
true,
then you can go back and try to pilot a one-to-one with them. So you have to show them what they were doing before they worked with you and tell that story and frame that up for them. What you help them achieve and what the results were, like quantifiably, and then show them where you see areas for improvement, areas for growth, areas for expansion, because you know them so well, and try to take them along that journey. But that's going to require content, account insights, messaging, customer success insights if you have a customer success team. And, you might have to develop content that is specific to them. You have to speak to the actual company. So I'm going beyond industry pain point persona. What's happening in that organization, and how can what we're offering to them, solution, consulting, whatever we're offering to them, how can we play a role in their strategic initiatives in the next 12 to 18 months, so we can be seen as that valued partner, and how you can grow with them and give them the reason to stay and expand and grow with you. And that's where we like to start, or tell marketers to start, is with the customer side, because they can get insights for that they can learn and apply to the one to few, to one to many. And you can even improve all demand gen and marketing functions, because you can tell that better story. And then you might even change your ICP based on how the customers are fitting, because if your customers that are the most profitable for you, that are the best fit for you, that work really well, that stay longer, they might not be in your ICP that you already have maybe defined, especially if it was defined a couple of years ago.
So true. I love the idea of starting with customers. You get a lot of great stories and intel from there. So customer interviews is probably a good way to start. But how are you delivering this? So let's say you speak with a customer, whoever is owning this new strategy and trying to get this off the ground. They go in, they talk to a customer, because we're starting with one-to-one, but maybe several different people at that customer, and they extract info. They know what is key, what's important for them, where there could be some gaps. I'm sure they talk to the CS team and pull all this together. Is it like creating one-pagers, creating videos, creating content of different types and delivering it from the marketing side, ads, email through CS? Is it an executive getting on a call with them and discussing these points that you pulled out? What is it, all of that?
It's a little bit of a combination of both. So we do consulting and implementation, meaning we'll create content, whether that's a white paper, a one-pager, an article that's specific to that particular client that will tell their story so that we could use it with them. Emails, messaging, reframes that we need to have to get people, like if maybe you're engaged with certain people in the organization, but you need to go a level and maybe engage with their VPs or their bosses in order to get them, because they're going to be on the decision-making committee. We'll create messaging that's relatable or relevant to those people that you might not have engaged with. And then marketing can use it in their efforts, and then sales ideally would use it in their efforts as well. So it depends on the problem of what we're actually creating. But when I say content, it can be a variety. We've done everything from case studies that were specific to clients so that we could show our value and show the value of maybe going to another provider, because, they're at renewal time. So they wanted to maybe protect the account. We've done articles that were specific for a conversation post-sales call, like they were having an issue during the sales call, like the rep and the prospect were having a challenge. So we created an article to address that challenge because maybe they couldn't convey it in the actual call. We've created emails. We've created, reframes that the sales team needs to use in order to get that conversation going in a live sales call. So it goes across the board depending where teams are in their journey.
So you mentioned a couple of examples to me before we got on the mics. And one thing you mentioned was improving. So not only we want to get beyond pipeline, right? We want to get to revenue impact, whether that's retention, expansion, net new. How do you see deal size being impacted by ABX? What can you do there to improve the deal size?
One of the ways that we like to tell people when they're focusing on who they're going to target for ABM is ideally a client or a prospect that is worth double than their average deal size, because we're putting so much work and effort into it, especially when a lot of companies are going up market and they're targeting the enterprise. They need to change their ICP for the enterprise. They need to change their approach for the enterprise, because selling to the mid-market, marketing to the mid-market is definitely different than the enterprise. So buyer personas may need to be expanded. Aligning with key strategic priorities is really important. So if you have a customer that, I'm just going to throw a company out there, Procter & Gamble, right? And you're only embedded in a small division of what they're doing. You need to see what they're doing as an organization. What are they talking about? What are their leaders talking about? What are their strategic priorities for the next year or so? And how can we fit into those and help them achieve them? So content needs to be designed for those specific organizations. So if we have specific targets, there's a lot of bespoke content and messaging for these accounts, hence why deal sizes are going to be bigger because we're putting so much effort into them. Sales teams need enterprise reframes that are going to be need to be made. Enterprise business case and stories are going to need to be created to make that connection. And taking that strategic account-based enterprise sales and marketing approach, it requires a different go-to market. It requires a new way of looking at things. Again, going back to delivering an account experience across the buyer's journey. So from engagement to close, we want to make sure that the messaging is on point. The content is the same. It's talking to them and not their industry, not their role, not their specific pain point. It's talking to them on a personal level, on a, what's important to them as a professional, and then what's important to their team or their division, and then the company. So it's all relative. It's not just one aspect of it. And working together in sales and marketing is really key to this. In order to get these double deal sizes or even go up market, if sales and marketing are not working together, then it's not going to be as productive. And being aligned is one thing, but using the same messaging, using the same content, making sure that we can all work as a team to win, protect, and expand, key value accounts, it's really going to require everyone on board. It is not a departmental initiative. It really is a company initiative. So in order to move away from maybe a commoditized or transactional pain point selling, which is what a lot of people we've seen have done, they need to have marketing content campaigns, marketing created sales outreach, cadences that are going to focus on more than persona pain points, because otherwise it's going to put you back in that transactional sale again, because pain is different from person to person, but it's not as important as a strategic business problem. So it might not be able to drive a business decision with just a pain, depending how relative that pain is to one. So if we're going to focus on commodity pain points, then again, we sound like our competitors. We're not talking to them specifically, and we're not talking about account-specific issues that we see. So aligning sales and marketing on that conversation that you're going to have and work hand in hand with sales to enable this right account experience from beginning to end is really crucial. And it's about having every touch point be cohesive.
Yeah, this makes so much sense how it's ultimately at the end of the day about the customer's experience, right? And why they want to stay with you and keep growing with you, and they see the value of working with you. Because as you're speaking through this, I keep coming back to, okay, all of this data you're extracting, right, to be able to personalize and create content specific for this one account. Where do you recommend housing all of that insight to fuel this alignment for all teams?
So I think it has to be, that's a good question. It has to be a joint effort. You mean housing it like physically or?
Really? Because I can see pulling a ton of information, right? And the intent, everybody wants to be aligned.
Yeah.
But to drive the true alignment, make sure the messaging is consistent. And okay, you pulled this information, somebody is interviewing, right? And pulling this information or on a call randomly, they realize that this is a key initiative of the company overall beyond what you technically are involved in your software or services. So where can they house this? Is it just like Google Docs to start? Can that work if everyone's using it? Does it have to be inside their CRM and everybody's looking at this? Or
yeah, I think there's bunch of different platforms that people use, but I think Google Docs is one of the ones that is like very easy to use and everyone can see it, and it's always changing. But the most important part of this is making sure you're pulling the insights from the systems that you have. If you have Salesforce, if you have HubSpot, if you have whatever it is that you're using, get the data there so that you can implement a better strategy. So like whatever notes the customer success team has, if you're going to start doing, your account-based approach and start it with the customers, make sure you have those insights and you're addressing the problems and challenges that they're seeing with their customers in the content, in the strategy. But it definitely doesn't have to be anything high tech or complicated.
yeah. Starting simple. So speaking of not having to be high tech, because I think I'm hearing you say it's kind of like it all should be connected, right? So get it in your CRM, whatever CRM you're using. And then maybe this is like a brief, like a ABM brief of this specific one-to-one plan, this campaign. And it's pulling that information in and what it means from there. So and that could also be linked to from the CRM. But if everybody just knows where to find everything, that's key, right? Like just everyone being on the same page, literally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And more importantly, the meetings to see where things need to change, and not on a quarterly basis, ideally on a biweekly or monthly basis, because information can change for a customer. Let's say we're working with ABM for our customers. If something happens at the customer success team level that we can address on the marketing or on the sales side, then we need to know about it sooner rather than later. So I think more check-ins and more visibility from all teams is really important.
Yeah. And with the being able to get started without high tech, right? Like we talked about Sixth Sense, demand base, which I think are synonymous with ABM, ABX nowadays.
Yeah.
Do you need these platforms? Can you just get started on a single channel, or, can you start small before you end up on leveraging these, or is it best to start out with a platform?
No, absolutely. I am heavily, I'd say that I like the tools. I think they're great, but they're expensive for what you're asking them to do. And then to me, what I've seen from customers and what I've seen from talking to people that have been users of these different platforms, and it's across the board, it's not one platform or another, is they're great at filling the pipeline. So if pipeline is an issue for you and you need to fill your pipeline, that's great. They are not really great for accelerating deals, pushing deals further through the buyer's journey. So it's not necessary to have. To tell people to do the opposite. I've seen too many people that buy the tech, get lost in it, then they don't get the ROI and they get upset after a contract for a couple of years, or they've inherited it and they don't know what to do because it was set up poorly. And then they start blaming it on the tech, and it's really not the tech's fault. It's the fact that you didn't have a strategy going in before you purchased that tech. So basically, those people who had purchased the tech first have retrofitted what they were doing with demand gen and just kind of hoping that they were going to get revenue for it. And that's not the best way to do it. I always say start small. And I know that's scary because as marketers, we're always pushed to scale, but start small with the customers that are, or clients and accounts that are very lucrative for you, so that you can learn from the one-to-one, and then you can scale the learnings in the one-to-few and one-to-many. So it's almost like the one-to-many is the top of the funnel demand. And then one-to-few, they get further engagement, maybe a little bit closer to further in their journey. And then one-to-one is they've engaged, there's a strategic priority. We have a story to tell that's relevant to them, and they could be a great partner and a great fit for us. Then they get one-to-one. So it's all about qualifying them, but starting with the one-to-one with customers, like I was mentioning before, is really the first way to go. And when we work with people, we don't really buy any tech. Like we use what they have already. If they're already using a platform, we'll help them not necessarily man it, but we'll help them try to improve what's going on. We'll try to see what kind of insights they're getting from it. And I think a lot of people have relied on these platforms to guide their strategy. So there's intent. We need to show them X, Y, and Z content. But the problem with that is that your competitors are also seeing the same signals, because at this point, everyone has intent of some sort, or most people do. And so they're responding to it very similar. So if you're responding to the intent the same way, then you're going to sound very similar, instead of taking the time to be more strategic and say, well, what's the reason for that intent? Is something going on internally? Is there a big shift or a big focus? Did they just have a new product launch? Did they just merge and they're trying to current things that they're doing internally? I mean, there's a billion different ways to look at this information, but to me, intent's a springboard. It's not like a North Star.
Yeah, I love this. I also, as you're talking through your stories, I have so many more questions that this parlays into. So how many one-to-one targets do you think are feasible to work at the same time?
It depends on how many people you have focused on ABM, but I would say if you only have one person, which is what I've spoken to a lot of different people, that maybe one person owns it, I would say a dozen or less. Because if you're going to do one-to-one and do it right, then it has to be a manageable number. And I've even seen, maybe the top 5 customers, we're going to try to expand them or retain them, or we have top 5 accounts that have engaged with us and have gone dark, but they would be great fits. We're going to put some extra resources and research and insights into how we can get them more engaged. So one-to-one is not 500 people, 500 accounts.
Yeah.
That's one to many.
Agreed. I love this idea. I have not had the opportunity to focus on one-to-one. I definitely have jumped straight into one-to-many in my ABM history, maybe one-to-few in some cases. But I love the idea of targeting. Let's say you've identified through what you mentioned, right, of finding those red lines and those issues and where those 10 opportunities are that you want to start out with, or 5. Do you recommend, if there's one person that's focused on ABM, take them like sitting in on CS meetings and listening to the gong recordings and just really absorbing so much? It's like an added layer of value for those CX people, really.
It totally is, because we do it when we work with clients, but we tell other people that if they're doing, like a scrappier ABM approach and they don't, they have limited resources, or if it's just them, listen to the sales calls, listen to the customer calls, because sales might tell you one thing in their notes or in their replay of how the call went, but you as a third party might hear something else that you can take out of it and say, well, they were kind of hung up on this issue. Maybe we need to address it somehow. And sales might be like, well, I didn't hear that, or it went great, or, they're on board. And it's sometimes we're a little, I think sometimes too close to it as a salesperson or a customer success, and having someone else listen to it that's not familiar with that relationship might make it a little easier to find nuggets that you can run with when it comes to content and messaging and how we're going to approach that account. So definitely we do it, and we suggest that other people do it too, listening in.
Yeah. Love that. Do you ever leverage or suggest customers leverage events as part of their ABM strategy, or is it pretty much mostly digital at this point?
You can leverage events. Again, I think that's more one-to-few and one-to-many. And I see a lot of events, tied into fields. And if you do get some engagement maybe at an event, and there was a particular reason that person reached out or engaged with you, then definitely keep a communication loop going, because it might turn into, it was a one-to-many or one-to-few account. And it might turn out that, maybe we should readdress and reassess this and make it a one-to-one. So definitely all that communication has to be flowing. If there's like a great conversation that needs to be looked into more with a potential customer or an actual customer that maybe could grow, it definitely, I wouldn't use it as the main part of it, but definitely tie it in to see how you can fit it in.
Or creating like a bespoke event for that specific account, right?
Yes.
Like inviting like several key stakeholders or something. Okay, cool. Something that I've seen come out is, I wouldn't call this ABM, I'd call this just sales and marketing conversations when you have a good relationship, is when I talk to sales and I know they're targeting X account and they tell me about this person, they really want to get in front of them. We create some kind of a campaign together. Then we're thinking, you know what, this actually could work really well for this and this account as well. So it kind of goes from a one-to-one mini campaign or approach into one-to-few, because it branches out and you start thinking about others that could benefit from it. Do you see that happening too if you're starting out with a one-to-one approach?
Absolutely. Like the idea is, I know it's scary to say like doing a one-to-one and putting all of your quote unquote eggs into one basket and putting all your resources and stuff, but those resources that you're creating, the messaging you're creating, the pieces of content that you're creating can be used in other aspects. It's not to say that you create it and it's just for that. It's so that you can utilize it in other areas as well. But it's more of, we're going to use these top accounts to kind of hone that message, get it better, edit and tweak and learn. And that way we can be even more relevant for the other campaigns and efforts that we have.
Cool. Love it. You gave another example offline of how ABM, ABX can be leveraged to improve win rates. We've talked a lot about like retention, expansion, and really all different aspects, because ultimately it's just improving the customer and prospect experience, the whole journey.
Yeah.
But because if ABM is not to drive pipeline, it's to drive revenue, how can we close that gap and leverage ABX strategy to improve win rates?
So it's all about getting as specific to the account as possible. So if you are trying to close maybe a new logo, you want to make sure that you know what's going on in that organization who your competitors are that they might be looking at as well, and then how you differentiate. And I think one of the key things that a lot of teams forget is how can we differentiate from the competition? And that's the teaching for differentiation, but that leads to you. And that is a big piece of ABM. That's a big piece of ABM, whether it's for net new or for customers or existing accounts, is how can we get as relevant to the account as possible? And I'm not saying relevant to, again, the persona or a pain point or an industry. It's like, what's important to Jane Smith? What's important to her in her role, and what's important to her in her department, and what's important to her in the organization? And how can we get all those layers of relevance catered to her and then catered to other decision makers within her organization that also would be involved in this closing this deal?
And where do you pull information? So Jane Smith, right? And you find out that her big goals this year are ABC and her struggles getting there are XYZ. Where do you go back to pull like some proprietary? Because everyone could go now to ChatGPT, spin up some content, type this in, ask for some content and send that over. But how do you get like stories from inside the company that are relevant to those specific pieces and customize it to you? Like, where do you go to get proprietary content that can be leveraged?
It's a lot of legwork of looking, what are they talking about online? What are their colleagues talking about online? Whether that's on LinkedIn, whether that's in press releases, whether that's in their revenue meetings, what they're saying about new products, what their website is saying that their initiatives are, what their leadership is saying. Because usually when the leadership is saying that is important, it's going to trickle down to different departments, and how you can leverage and make that connection. And that's where marketing comes in to help sales make that connection, tell that story, make that relevant to them. It's not easy for a salesperson to necessarily kind of connect all those dots to see the relevance. But as a marketer, it's our job to help them kind of see that picture and create that picture for them so that they can convey it to a prospect. It's a lot of looking around at different places. So it's going to be different for every organization and industry, but it's a lot of research. So it's going back to, how can I research? ChatGPT is great because it can give you, where do I go first? It's almost like Google on steroids for coming me up with different things if you want to know like what's happening in an actual account, what they're planning, where they're investing. So if they're investing in certain things that align with what your solution is or what your offering is, then that's something that you can speak to as well. It's really about figuring out what those strategic initiatives are and then tying your solution and offering back to it to make that better business case.
Yeah, it seems like everything just comes back to connecting the dots, right? And showing how you are relevant to solving that problem for them.
Correct.
Or maybe not solving a problem, but reaching that goal even beyond. I love that. What's been top of mind for me lately, probably my whole career, I'm sure all of us grapple with this, is how to make your product or service a must-have, not a nice-to-have, right? I feel like I've said this a lot lately, so sorry if everyone is sick of me saying or asking this, but ABX feels like an answer to that because you're getting much more into the bigger picture of your prospects and your target accounts. And you're identifying, okay, this is what matters to you as a company, not just like if we're a MarTech, like not just the marketing team at your company, but the business overall. So and you connect the dots between this MarTech to the whole company's goals, and you just get into the bigger picture of things. They see you as a valuable partner versus just a MarTech tool.
Yeah, well, if you tell that story correctly, you're creating more value for them, which means you're creating a solution for them that could be stickier. And potentially, this is how when we tell the bigger picture, the bigger story picture, that's how you can get a higher deal size, because you show that let's go with that MarTech solution. How are we impacting sales and with the solution? How are we impacting customer success? And in turn, how is that impacting revenue? And that's how your deal size gets bigger, because you're showing your impact on other areas of the business and not just maybe the person that's using it on a day-to-day basis.
Yes. Love that. I feel like it's so hard when you have we go talk about ICP all the time, right? And we're always laser focused on our ICP, but we have to kind of think bigger and beyond that to tell a bigger story and to land and expand, as we always say, right?
Absolutely.
Let's see. Okay. I have a bajillion notes here that I'm probably going to pick your brain offline for even more things, but I'm curious, what would you, you mentioned this to me, and I really hope I'm not putting you in the spot and you have answer, because I'm excited to hear you have other recommendations for ABM, women in ABM that we should follow or listen to. So if you have any of that handy, that would be great to share with.
I have tons, and I have a podcast too, and we just recorded an episode with Marta George at Ping Identity. She has very interesting approach to scaling ABM. She mentioned, that they were actually scaling down to scale up so that they can perfect what they were doing. And then we've had a lot of other marketers, because I try to make sure that we're balanced as we can, which is really sometimes can be hard. So other amazing women marketers in ABM, we had Nancy Carlisle Harlan, who was a former ABM leader at UiPath, and they have a really mature ABM program. Honey Marks at Red Hat, Kristina Jaramillo at Riverbed, Lindsay Pat Baggett at Tanium. We did something where she talked about hot takes when it comes to ABM. That was an interesting conversation. So definitely check out that podcast, but there's plenty of women to engage with. So it's not so male dominated, which I know we faced.
Yes. And marketing overall, but definitely ABM too. You're right. So ABM Done Right, by the way, for everyone, that's Kristina's podcast. Definitely check it out. A bunch of those women will be guests on there. So definitely listen to those. And is there any other last final advice you have for our listeners today? Mostly marketers, mostly women, not all. Last nugget of wisdom, ABM or not?
Okay. So always think about, I think marketing sometimes forgets this, is how can we impact revenue? Whether that's retention, whether that's expansion or net new. If we can tie our success or our strategies to revenue, then we'll make ourselves more prominent and more important, and we'll be able to grab that seat at the decision-making table. Because if we're at the end of the day impacting revenue just along with sales and customer success, then people will see how important marketing is. Because I feel like too many times marketing is something that companies think they can get by with cutting, and it's because we haven't proved ourselves as revenue makers or revenue impactors. So make sure we focus on that, and think of, if you're adopting or have an account-based strategy, don't end it sooner, or try to fight to end it sooner rather than later. I've seen too many organizations cut it because they were thinking of it as a quick win when it's really a long-term business strategy. If you're engaging in account-based, you may see results if you're lucky in 30 days, but you have to give it at least 90, if not more.
Yeah. How would you even say? I feel like a year. I know, that's
Who's everyone when you say that.
It does, yeah. We're like scarred from SEO, right? That's the crawl, walk, run approach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And know what? I just had like a light bulb epiphany as you were speaking. What I was saying about having to make your product or service a must-have, not a nice-to-have, we have to remember to do that for ourselves.
Absolutely. Right? First, before we even do it for our company. But yes, you're right. Totally right.
So we're not a cost center. We are a must-have, not a nice-to-have that can be cut when budgets get tighter.
Correct.
Love it. Kristina, where is it best if people have further questions and want to pick your brain or talk about getting involved with your agency? Where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Definitely on LinkedIn. Go to our website, personalabm.com. We even have, like I said, a podcast. There's a podcast page on the site. Follow us on LinkedIn because we have different pages for the podcast and the organization. But I live and breathe on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to reach out to me.
Cool. Yeah. At LinkedIn, for sure. It's just Mecca for us marketers. It's always where you can find all of us the most. Awesome. Thank you for shedding a little light onto ABM. I know there's so much more we could dive into, which is why you have to follow her and connect and listen to her podcast, because you'll get more golden nuggets every time you listen to an episode. So thank you so much for joining, Kristina.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And everyone who listened today, please share with a friend, write a review, rate us. It all helps us get in front of more people. So thank you. Bye, everyone.